Welcome back, guys. Over the weekend, unfortunately, I had a bunch of my time wasted, which really sucks when I'm trying to put every hour I can into the build, and doubly so considering weekends are work days for me, so I can have an episode ready on Tuesday for you guys. What happened was, on Sunday, my girlfriend and I drove 2 hours north to go look at an E36 M3 for her, and once we got up there, the seller of the car decided he wanted to delay a bit, and then wanted to reschedule, and then wanted to delay some more. And eventually we said, hey, look, man, we're going to bail. We're not going to buy this car. And we drove back home, and it wasted our entire day. I also had some business stuff to take care of over the weekend, and ultimately just lost my hours that I'm able to put into the car, but I still made some good progress. I've been focused at the back of the car getting ready for our aero package from RS Future, so I'm going to give you guys a full rundown on what I've been doing back there. We've got coolant lines run through the rocker panels and a few other cooling system parts finished up, and I've got some stuff to talk to you guys about, such as where on earth are my wheels? I've got no idea, and I don't know if anybody does, to be honest with you. There's a little bit of everything in this one. Let's dive into it.
It was all the way back in June that I first showed you guys the basis for building our aero package, and it all hinges on building supports on these rear chassis members. These are originally supports for the rear bumper of the car, but because they are so well tied into the chassis of the 308, it makes for a great place for us to mount our rear wing. In that June episode, I showed you guys the process of drawing up in CAD a set of base plates and wing uprights for us to build. And initially, I thought that I would water jet or laser cut these base plates, but today, we're going to build them by hand, the good old-fashioned way. I'm cleaning up some 1/8" plate steel for us to use, as it should be more than strong enough for this job. And as is always the case around here, I've printed out our CAD templates for us to trace and make by hand. After marking out the outlines, the fold lines, and the holes that need to be drilled, I folded them and cut them off camera. And here, we're going through the process of drilling the holes and following that with cleaning them up using a chamfering bit.
Now, if you look at the vise in that shot, this is a pretty simple pro tip, but it also might not be super obvious to some people, but sometimes you need soft jaws on your vise so you don't damage what you're holding or put marks and nicks into it. Just some simple folded over aluminum in your vise will work great. Super cheap, easy to replace. If you don't have a way to bend aluminum, you can just get some aluminum angle from Home Depot or whatever in their like parts aisle. They have this exact shape. It's perfect. Simple trick.
In preparation for welding, I covered up the engine and got to cleaning up all of the surfaces, and in retrospect, this turned out to be a terrible camera angle for you to even see what I'm doing, so my apologies. But after everything was cleaned, I got our plates tacked into place and then proceeded to weld them in completely. I checked the angle and set them both to 1/2 degree so that they will match side to side. I'm still significantly more comfortable TIG welding on the bench versus something like this in the back of the car, so I can't say that the welding came out as great as I hoped that it would, but I can still tell that I'm getting better, and nevertheless, I enjoyed the process immensely. I repeated this entire process on the other side, and now you can see the finished installed plates. This will be the perfect platform for us to transmit downforce through the chassis and to the tires of the car. Now I just need to actually follow through on getting those wing uprights and a slew of other parts laser cut. These plates did help tidy up the back of the car and hide some of the ugly chassis, but I followed this job up by trying to solve the rest of it, and I found myself here.
All right, real talk for a minute. I'm gonna rant about something, so if you don't want to listen to it, jump ahead. I'll put a segment here, a chapter for you. But I'm at the back of the car, and I've gotten these kind of spoiler base plates welded into place, and I'm trying to come up with some ideas of how to handle some kind of just aesthetic choices back here, and I'm really struggling at the moment because ultimately the chassis in this car is horrendously ugly. I know that in most ways that does not matter. It is purely an aesthetic choice. And I get why the car is built the way that it is. Ferrari had to make decisions in order to get this car built and keep it affordable, relatively speaking. And it's mass produced in a way. It's not a unibody vehicle. So there's a lot of factors that go into why does the car look and why is it the way that it is underneath this beautiful skin. But unfortunately, I'm deeper into this car than most people will ever find themselves, but with that comes seeing Ferrari's crimes that they hid, so to speak. For example, the corners in the back of this car are fiberglass and they're bonded in, and it's all really ugly. It's got glue on them that held carpet down, which is understandable. The shape of it is not pretty because you could never see it. The pretty side is actually facing towards the inner wheel well, so you would see it if you're under the car. Just the construction of this thing is ugly. It's all square tubing, just bits and pieces all welded together, and it's bad. But I have to decide at some point that I'm okay with it, because unless I'm going to start all over and tube chassis this car, which would be pretty sweet, but that's going to take us a couple years to get done, it is what it is. This is kind of what I signed up for, and that's, I wanted to build a 308, and 308s have really ugly chassis underneath them. Does any of this matter? No, but I know I'm going to look in the back of this car, I'm going to admire the engine back here, and I know a lot of other people are too, and I know the things that I'm going to see back here are always going to bug me, even if nobody else will really notice it. I know that I'm looking at stuff that 90% of people who look in the back of this car are never going to pay any attention to, the way that two certain chassis tubes meet together, or the way that Ferrari decided to kind of separate one compartment from another, and bits and pieces of construction methods, things like that. But it's what I see when I look at it, and it's just killing me. It's bugging me, and I don't know how to get over it. I know it's going to bug me forever. And part of me sitting here saying, screw it, cut out the fiberglass. Let's just dig deeper. But it's going to be a can of worms, and no matter what, I'm still going to be looking at ugly chassis underneath it. I think I just need to kind of let go for a second and just say, hey, dude, it is what it is. Deal with it. But that's hard. That sucks to feel that way. And I wish Ferrari had just made a better looking car underneath. I wish it looked as good underneath as it does on the outside. But anyway, that's my rant. I've been sitting here messing with this for like an hour, and it's driving me crazy. Okay, back to it.
We're back at the front of the car, and we need to start plumbing the radiator. And oddly enough, to do that, we need to start by modifying the Liberty Walk body kit. For one reason or another, all four fenders include a lot of what I would call this large flashing at the bottom of each corner. Unfortunately, this flashing is in our way because we need to run our coolant lines through the rocker panels. And with this flashing in place, we're simply unable to get access to the holes we need to pass our coolant lines through. We'll come back in the future and design some sort of closeout panel to cover this back up, but that's a problem for future me. And right now, I want to plumb this car. I will say there is something a little bit nerve-wracking about cutting into a body kit that cost upwards of $10,000, but thankfully this is fiberglass and it's easily repaired if I make a mistake. But thankfully today, this was problem-free. I know we'll go back and finish these edges better in the future, but I decided to get things a little bit cleaned up, at least in the interim. Along with the rockers, we also need access under the hood, so it's time to remove the hood and our template for our hood duct so that we can remove a final few pieces. In a former episode, I mentioned keeping the vacuum line for the brake booster in place without thinking about the fact that that's definitely not going to work, and we're going to abandon vacuum brakes entirely. In fact, converting the brake system on this car might be the biggest job yet still on the table. To plumb the radiator, we're finally moving up to dash 20 fittings in line. The biggest stuff we'll be using on this car, and just about the biggest stuff you'll see used for automotive purposes. Once again, this is Vibrant Performance fittings and hose, and I'm using this because I want to make sure that we have as much coolant flow as possible. Now comes the process of actually routing the coolant hoses through the rocker panels of the car, and to say that it's a tight fit is a bit of an understatement. I was under the impression that dash 20 line would fit with ease, but it could not possibly be any tighter. It was a pretty serious push to get the hosing through the rocker, but in the end it did work out. Now I will admit I got a little bit ahead of myself. One of the fittings on this hose needs to be installed after the hose is in place because the fitting will not pass through the rocker itself. It's simply too large. But I could have installed this fitting before we installed the hose. One end could have been done on the bench. But for this side of the car, I did wind up installing this fitting while the hose was installed in the car. It was honestly easier than trying to remove and reinstall the hose again. For the other side of the car, I was smart enough to install one of our fittings first. Although this footage is sped up, you can get an idea of just how tough it can be to assemble Dash 20 fittings, so don't get discouraged if it takes some serious muscle. The driver's side of the car was an even tighter fit for the hose. I was actually worried that it might not go through. So for anyone modifying a 308 of their own, Dash 20 is as big as you can possibly go. It was important to push the hose all the way into place and seat the fitting in the front so that I could figure out exactly how long this hose needs to be by positioning the other end at its final destination. Once I figured out the overall length of the hose, I cut it and then installed this end of the fitting while the hose was installed in the car, a necessity as mentioned before. Alright, so here's our hose finished, and we need to hook it up to this guy right here, like that. But the problem is that this originally came with a Dash 16 O-ring boss fitting, and it fits in here like that. But, as you can see, it's quite close to the cylinder head. And if we try to put a Dash 20 on it, we can only get a few threads in before the hex on the Dash 20 fitting hits the head. This is as far in as we can thread it in, and it hits back here. So we're gonna take this guy and chuck it in the lathe and turn the hex down so it'll clear, and then I've got a creative way that we can use to tighten it. Unfortunately, I don't really have the right facing tools to put a good finish on the finished part here, but we're going to do the best we can with what we've got. All right, pretty simple fix, pretty simple change. The question will be, how do we actually tighten this down and know that it's tight? Well, it's going to be really simple. We're just going to use this fitting to do it. Once we put this in place, if I can do this one-handed here, and tighten it down, it will seat this fitting on these threads until it stops, and then it'll start spinning this because this is a swivel fitting, so it should work out just fine. I'll show you. Let me get both hands free, and we'll tighten it down. It's hard to tell thanks to yet another poor camera angle choice, but in order to pull this off, I'm having to ratchet the socket into place, so to speak at least. The finished part both looks and fits exactly as I had hoped. That brings us to our water pump. If you missed the previous episode, this is a 55 gallon per minute M.I.A water pump, and it's what we're using for our radiator and engine cooling system. We're gonna put the pump down here, and that's right next to the water pump for our heat exchanger system. We've got two ports here, and I'm going to try my best to point them out. We've got a port right there, and then one on the other side of the main cylinder. Now we need to go from this port up to this AN fitting right here, but the problem at hand is we can't fit a Dash 20 on that port for the same reasons that we couldn't fit one right here. But we can't even do it by machining it like we did here. This won't even work. There's just not enough room for the Dash 20 hex to actually thread onto it. So we're gonna have to run one Dash 16 line from that port down to the pump. And then on the other side of the pump, we've just got one more hose left. So with this last one, we'll have all of the cooling system hoses finished. See, here we've got our hose coming from the front of the car, and I'm trying to light this up so you can see it, but we've got a port on the front of the pump. You can see it buried right there. So we're gonna have to raise this guy up just a touch so that that will clear the chassis, but ultimately the plan will be to take our hose, put a straight fitting on it, and run it directly into the pump. And with that, we should be all finished. So now let's take a look at how the plumbing actually works at the front of the car, because I've yet to show that to you. On the passenger side, we're going to relocate the lower fitting and put it on the face side of the end tank. On the driver's side of the car, things are a little bit more simple. We're entering on the side of the end tank with a Dash 20 fitting, which we'll have to swap in place of the Dash 16 that's on the end tank currently. Both hoses hug the tops of the fenders and stay clear of everything. Once the hoses dive into the wheel wells, they're held in place by the factory clamps, mimicking the position of the original heater lines.
Now, only because I know some of you guys are gonna say it, yes, bleeding this will suck. Those high lines going to the front where they arc up to the tops of the front fenders is going to be problematic, I'm aware. We'll get it bled one way or another, even if I gotta split it and put an inline filler neck in the front so that we can get air out up here too. No matter what, dude, it's fine.
And our final tidbit for the episode is we got some parts back from the powder coater, including the black vents behind the headlights and all of the E36 parts, which means the E36 can now go back together.
All right, I know I've already done quite a bit of talking to the camera in this episode, but it is what it is. We're gonna talk for a minute, bounce if you want. I mentioned that I have no idea where my wheels are. And some of you guys have been following the series along, you know that I've gone way out of my way to run a very specific and certain set of wheels because I like them. There's no other reason, it's just because to me, wheels are one of the most important visual statements of a build. It's one of the most crucial and critical parts. They make or break a car in my opinion, and I found some that I really like. I really wanna run them. And it's been a lot of work to do it. And part of that has been sending them out to get them custom rebuilt in 17-inch, and we have no inners. We have outers, but no inners. I think this is likely a result of all of the supply issues everyone's facing and all of the boats stuck out in the port. I don't know whether the halves are being made abroad and brought in, or if it's a raw material problem for who's making the halves. I don't know, I don't build wheels, but I don't have wheels, and I have no ETA on when they're gonna be here. And the problem is, even though we're not gonna be driving the car anytime soon, there's so many projects on this car that I cannot finish until I have those wheels. I can't finalize all of the suspension. I don't wanna weld all of my control arms up. I can't finalize my suspension coilover mount locations because I wanna make sure that those won't hit the wheels once we put them on. Things like that. It's a huge problem, and it's holding aspects of the car up. Now, yes, there is a ton of other stuff that I can be working on this car, there's no doubt, and I'm trying to bounce around and do my things, but the way that my head works, I want those wheels here. I want to make that type of progress. I want to get this car back on the ground, and it's been a big hurdle for me, and sometimes I feel like I'm sitting here spinning my wheels, even though I don't have any, on progress. With that said, I'm doing the best that I can. There's still a ton of other stuff to do, but that's my wheel update for you guys. I know a ton of you guys have been wondering where are they, what's happening, when you get to see them. I'll show them to you when I have them. I want to wait until they're at least here and assembled before I show you what I have done. Some of you will love it, some of you will hate it. It's gonna be fun. I'm excited for it, but problem is I have no idea when we will have them. So, there you have it. And there we have it, yet another episode finished up. I hope you guys enjoyed it, but Friday's episode should be a little bit better. I've got better laid groundwork and plans for what to accomplish, and hopefully no time wasted this time. I hope you guys are enjoying the series as always. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet. It helps me out a bunch. And as always, thank you for the support. I'll catch you guys at the end of the week.